Most people don't quit manifestation because it failed them. They quit because they were taught the wrong story about how reality responds. They tried to make the universe listen to their thoughts while their inner world was quietly speaking a completely different language. Quantum manifestation was never controversial because it doesn't work. What unsettled people was the gap between what they were told to do and what actually shapes experience beneath the surface. They were handed a simplified formula, and when life did not bend to it, they concluded the entire idea was an illusion. Somewhere along the way, manifestation was flattened into mental repetition. Believe harder, picture it longer, stay emotionally bright. As if reality were persuaded by emotional volume. But when effort turned into exhaustion, people blamed themselves for not being spiritual enough, or they dismissed the whole concept as fantasy. The deeper misunderstanding was never about belief, it was about what truly influences outcomes. Reality does not rearrange itself around thoughts alone. It responds to the condition of the one perceiving it. And a perceiver is not a sentence in the mind. It is a living system made of sensation, emotional tone, identity, attention, and awareness moving together. This is where the fracture begins. People attempt to shape outcomes while their bodies are tense. They speak of abundance while their internal world remains braced for loss. They declare confidence while their nervous system signals danger. And reality answers the dominant state beneath the words, not the script spoken on the surface. When inner states conflict, no amount of positive language creates alignment. What appears as failure is simply coherence never forming. Manifestation was not meant to be an extra layer placed on top of life. It was meant to emerge naturally when the inner field settles into harmony. When that harmony is missing, belief becomes strain rather than signal. Here is the part most teachings avoid because it unsettles the ego. Intense wanting is rarely power. It is usually the echo of not having. And the more tightly desire grips, the clearer the message becomes that the system does not yet feel safe receiving. The field does not reward effort. It resolves inner contradiction. Two people can speak the same words and imagine the same future, yet only one experiences movement. One is negotiating with reality from instability. The other is resting in a state that does not provoke resistance. When you see this, manifestation stops feeling mystical. It begins to feel precise, not cold but ordered. Cause and effect still move, but they travel through states of being rather than wishes. Once manifestation was framed as something to control, pressure became part of the practice. Control feels productive on the surface, but beneath it carries a quiet message that the present moment is insufficient. That message disturbs coherence. Systems resolve when interference softens. They move into form when agitation subsides. The observer does not force the outcome into existence. The observer stops disrupting the conditions that allow it to take shape. Yet many practices train constant monitoring. Check your thoughts, correct your emotions, adjust your focus again and again. This trains vigilance, not stability. The inner field stays alert, never resting long enough for coherence to settle. When attention becomes attached to a specific future, presence thins. The inner world begins rejecting what is happening now, and rejection fractures alignment. This is why outcomes often feel close but never complete. Moments of coincidence appear, then momentum fades. The system never stabilizes. Those who experience flow are not passive. They act, choose, and move. But their sense of self is not bound to arrival. Their inner state remains regulated whether timing feels fast or slow. When awareness is free from emotional leverage, choice becomes clean. But control narrows awareness. It locks identity onto a single result while quietly pushing away the present moment. That pushing away creates incoherence, and incoherence keeps resolution suspended. This is why teachings that glorify intense desire often collapse. Urgency communicates that now is unsafe, and what is perceived as unsafe cannot settle into form. Reality does not push back against urgency, it echoes the quality of it. The real question is never how to force an outcome. The real question is what inside you is still creating noise. Interference is subtle. It appears as checking whether something is happening yet. It appears as measuring progress in your head. It appears as quietly asking if you are doing it correctly. None of this feels harmful. but all of it keeps awareness occupied rather than open. Manifestation shifts when supervision softens, when attention rests with what is present without trying to shape it, when identity no longer leans into tomorrow to feel complete, when the body stops interpreting waiting as a threat. At that point, reality responds not because you finally applied enough effort, but because the interference that was distorting the signal has faded. This reveals a deeper truth that is rarely taught. Manifestation does not collapse because belief is weak. It stalls because the nervous system has learned to stay involved. The body becomes the gate that decides whether awareness can move forward or remain looping familiar patterns. Most explanations speak about thoughts and intention. They rarely address the biological condition that determines whether awareness can shift at all. Consciousness does not operate separate from the body, it expresses itself through it. And the state of the nervous system determines whether awareness can access openness or remain bound to repetition. When the body lives in constant readiness, the brain orients toward prediction rather than possibility. It scans for what might go wrong. It rehearses what has already happened. It projects familiar outcomes into what has not yet occurred. This is functional for protection, but it closes the door on genuine novelty. When safety becomes the priority, the system favors what is known. Familiar patterns feel stable, even when they no longer serve growth. Awareness cannot choose a different direction while the body is committed to preserving what it already recognizes. This is why people can understand manifestation intellectually and still experience delay. The mind may be receptive, but the body remains guarded. Reality responds to the dominant signal carried by the system, not to the story the mind prefers to tell. Those who experience flow operate from a different inner condition. Their nervous systems spend more time in regulated states. Attention remains clear without becoming rigid. Presence is steady without turning forceful. Most importantly, the body is no longer signaling urgency. Urgency communicates that something is missing. Regulation communicates that nothing is wrong. And reality responds to that difference in tone. Stress does more than recall old memories. It organizes identity around them. You do not only remember the past, you inhabit it. And no new direction can emerge from an identity anchored in defense. This is why methods fail when placed on top of inner tension. You can imagine abundance while the body stays tight. You can speak of peace while the system remains alert. But awareness cannot move toward a future that the body does not feel safe approaching. Manifestation begins when the body softens its resistance to what is unknown. As regulation replaces vigilance, awareness steadies. As awareness steadies, identity loosens its grip. And when identity loosens, consciousness gains room to move without being pulled back by familiar reflexes. This is also why shifts often occur after rest, release, or genuine surrender. Not because the mind finally let go of effort, but because the nervous system returned to baseline. The body stopped guarding the sequence of time. When the future no longer feels threatening, it becomes accessible. This reframes manifestation entirely. It is not a mental strategy supported by the body. It is a biological condition that the mind explains afterward. The body leads, awareness follows, reality reorganizes afterward. When this order becomes clear, the question changes. It is no longer how to make things arrive sooner. It becomes how to stop transmitting tension into what has not yet appeared. Nothing is being withheld. What you call delay is simply the system waiting for quiet. Not silence of thought, but softness of state. When the inner field becomes calm enough to receive, movement no longer needs to be persuaded. There is a phase many people misunderstand just before change occurs. They expect clarity, excitement, or emotional confirmation. Instead, what often arrives is something unexpectedly plain, a sense of neutrality. And because neutrality does not feel dramatic, it is mistaken for misalignment. This stillness is not emptiness. It is resolution. It is the point where the inner system stops swinging between alternatives and settles into one direction without strain. Only then does change have room to consolidate. As long as desire carries emotional charge, the system stays active. Attention keeps leaning ahead. The mind keeps replaying possibilities. But when that charge dissolves, the inner world becomes quiet enough for awareness to rest. That quiet is not disengagement. It is coherence without effort. And this is where many people interrupt themselves. They mistake calm for loss of focus. They attempt to revive emotion. They reintroduce intensity. And in doing so, they bring back the very disturbance that had just begun to fade. Change settles when fluctuation subsides. Excitement feels productive, but it is still motion. It still leans toward what is not here yet. And that leaning carries a subtle message that something is missing. Neutrality carries no such message. It signals inner completeness. The body no longer braces, the mind no longer predicts. Attention returns to what is happening now, not because of discipline, but because there is nothing left to manage. This is where identity shifts quietly. You no longer feel like someone waiting. You no longer feel like someone trying. You do not even feel like someone practicing manifestation. You simply feel ordinary. And that ordinariness is one of the most overlooked signs of alignment. Those who experience effortless movement often describe this phase the same way. By the time things unfolded, they were no longer emotionally negotiating with reality. The inner conversation had ended. Awareness had already chosen a direction. Reality does not respond to excitement. It responds to congruence. And congruence feels calm. This is why shifts often occur when attention moves elsewhere. Not because focus disappeared, but because interference did. The nervous system stopped signaling lack. The mind stopped narrating delay. The observer became neutral enough to allow resolution. This phase can feel unfamiliar because it removes the emotional loop people are used to. There is no rush, no inner storyline, only presence. And presence, though quiet, carries weight. If you notice that desire no longer pulls at you the way it once did, not because you gave up, but because something inside you settled, that is not stagnation. That is stabilization. When stabilization occurs, reality reorganizes on its own timing. There is nothing to push, nothing to amplify, nothing to reawaken. The only requirement is to not disturb what is already aligned. At a certain point, every sincere seeker reaches a simple realization. Intention by itself is not enough. You can want something clearly. You can imagine it vividly. You can even believe in its possibility. And still nothing shifts. Not because intention lacks power, but because identity has not yet changed its position. In manifestation, identity is the frame through which experience arranges itself. Intention arises from that frame. It does not override it. When intention and identity move in different directions, reality follows identity every time. This is where many teachings fall short. They teach people how to form intentions while remaining internally unchanged. They ask for different outcomes without allowing the self who could live those outcomes to take root within them. Reality does not reorganize around requests. It reorganizes around what has become stable enough to be inhabited. Identity is not a personality label. It is a regulatory pattern. It is the internal posture your system returns to when nothing is being managed. It shows up in how you pause, how you choose, how you respond when there is no audience. Those who experience ease are not constantly forming intentions. They are repeatedly returning to a baseline that already assumes fulfillment. Their actions are not shaped by absence. Their rhythm is not shaped by urgency. Their emotional tone is not shaped by waiting. This is why movement begins to feel automatic. Reality is not being persuaded to change. It is aligning with what has already become consistent within you. From the view of consciousness, experience resolves in the direction of coherence. If identity is still organized around reaching, the loop of reaching continues to be reflected. If identity stabilizes around sufficiency, experience reorganizes to match that internal stance. This is also why change sometimes appears briefly and then fades. A new identity is touched during a moment of insight, a retreat, or a sudden opening. But when the system returns to its familiar baseline, experience follows that return. Continuity shapes outcomes more than intensity. This understanding softens pressure. You do not need to convince yourself harder. You do not need to hold attention all day. You do not need to monitor every thought. What matters is the version of you that emerges when effort relaxes. That version is the instruction the system repeats. Those who move with ease are not different in essence. They simply stop switching between internal positions. They allowed one identity to settle long enough for experience to organize itself around it. When that happens, Manifestation no longer feels like a task. It feels like a natural echo of who you are becoming. This is why collecting methods eventually feels heavy. Methods imply something is unstable and needs correction. Identity implies something has already been integrated. Reality does not respond to hustle. It mirrors coherence. As identity settles, intention loses its urgency. Experience does not need reminders. It adjusts quietly, without performance. At this stage, the question changes again. It is no longer how to make something happen. It becomes whether you are willing to stop returning to the familiar self when nothing appears to be moving yet. Because experience is already responding. It is responding to who you are when you are no longer trying to influence it. Eventually, all of this condenses into a simple recognition. Nothing required more effort from you. It required less interference. Experience was never waiting for stronger belief, better techniques, or higher emotional charge. It was waiting for steadiness. Change does not answer ambition, it answers coherence. When identity stabilizes, when the body no longer treats the future as something to manage, and when attention no longer swings between expectation and doubt, a quiet shift occurs. Reality stops feeling distant. It begins to feel responsive. Not theatrical, not mystical, responsive. This stage is rarely reached, not because it is difficult, but because it feels unfamiliar to the version of you that is used to effort. There is no rush in this state, no surge to manage, no inner momentum to sustain, only a quiet sense that nothing needs to be added to what already is. And it is within this simplicity that experience rearranges itself. What often disrupts this phase is the urge to make something out of it, to analyze it, to optimize it, to turn it into another practice. The moment that urge appears, effort returns. The inner field tightens. The openness that was present begins to contract. Those who remain aligned do not protect coherence through control. They allow it by not disturbing it. When inner harmony is present, experience does not need direction. Timing reorganizes, encounters unfold, paths converge, not because they were chased, but because nothing inside is pushing them away. This is why real movement feels inevitable rather than exciting. When change is genuine, there is no emotional spike. There is no inner conflict left to resolve. The system has already settled into recognition. At this stage, the question is no longer how to make something happen. It becomes how to remain steady without slipping back into effort. The pull toward old habits is subtle. The mind wants explanation. The body wants reassurance. Identity looks for confirmation. And without awareness, it is easy to return to trying. Not because alignment has vanished, but because it has not yet become familiar. Stability grows through gentleness, through allowing the nervous system to rest, through letting attention return to what is here, through not interfering with the quiet that is already formed. When this quiet becomes natural, manifestation no longer feels like a process you perform. It feels like a consequence of how you are living. And when coherence becomes ordinary, reality no longer feels distant. It begins to feel responsive. Not dramatic, not mystical, responsive.